Hello. What's your name?
Maggie.
Hello.
You really want to know my name?
Yes, I have to have your name
Okay.
because I'm not the only one going to see these videos. In 20 years, Josephine might see it, and she might not remember that you were Henrietta. She might just think of his name then.
Henrietta, Bartlett, Roberts, Ellis.
And Henrietta, where did you grow up?
Brigus.
And did you have a big family or a small family?
Well, my mother had my two brothers. My mother's first husband was Charlie Fry, and he was the cook
Okay.
on the Viking. And
Oh,
he went down in the galley when the Viking blew up.
you're kidding.
And my two brothers, one was 2 years old and the other was only 2 months.
Oh, you're kidding.
And 5 years or more after that, she met my dad,
What were your two brothers' names?
Harrison and Thomas.
Harrison and Thomas. And then she met your dad.
Hmm?
And then she met your dad.
Then she met my dad 5 years later, about four years later, I think it was. And they married because my dad and his father, my grandfather, were living alone in the big house out in Brigus, in the main center of town. They were by themselves because my grandmother had passed away for about 10 years or more. And my mom lived, my dad had all his farms where he grew vegetables and different things, was in on what they call the Cemetery Road. And that's where my mom was living with her husband's father. And I don't know if it was his second or third wife, I think. Wasn't her original first husband's mother.
No.
And it wasn't a good scene. It was never good, was it, Mary?
No.
It wasn't a good scene. So my mom used to go over and talk to my dad on the farm, and eventually she started to help
Yeah.
do things, because my mother was an outdoors, a very strong woman, about 5'11",
Oh, wow.
strong, very strong. She was a Harlem. And so, anyway, they married. My grandfather was pleased as punch, and so was my father, because they were getting 2 boys.
Oh, great.
2 sons coming in, you know.
Yeah.
And one of my brothers had the same name as my grandfather, Thomas
So that was
Roberts.
handy. That was handy.
Handy indeed.
Great.
And my dad decided when my mom married that they were not going to change my brothers' names. They were Frys, you know, Fry, F-R-Y. So he didn't adopt them. He didn't adopt them to change their names,
No.
but he adopted them, but not to change their names.
Yeah.
So that I came along. By that time, of course, I was the only one that my mom could have, because, I mean, my mom was
Older.
getting up there in years when she had me.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, I had my grandmother's and my father's name.
So that's why
That's
you have
why
so many names.
Yes,
And did you get along with your brothers?
yes,
Yes?
loved them.
Loved them. They were much
They-
older than you.
Oh yes,
How much older than you were they?
7, 8.5, and 7.
Yeah, so did they treat you like the little sister? They were playing with you all the time?
Yes, they treated me. They knew one thing. I was always wanting to go with them, you know, chase around
Of
behind
course.
them, and then they turn around one side to the other. He's coming again, and I was trekking anyway, you know. No, we all got along. But I got to tell you something. I didn't know my brothers had a different name than mine until I was I was 13 or 14 years
Really?
old. And I remember my brothers registering. See, they were in grade 1. There's only one left in grade 11, I
Yeah.
think. And the teacher was calling up names. He said, Thomas Fry. And I said, Hannah Roberts. You know, are they Fries? So
You
it took
got,
all that length of time.
for you to even realize it.
Nobody told.
No. Well, I guess it
Nobody
didn't make any difference.
No.
So you went to school in Brigus?
Yes.
So how old? Did you finish school or did you drop out a bit early?
No, I finished school right to grade 11.
And then you...
And in between all that, I went to the convent for 8 years in music, doing music.
While you were in school?
Yes.
And what kind of music were you doing? Like piano and that kind of stuff?
Organ.
Organ. And are you good at it?
I was.
You were? That's fine.
I don't know if I am now.
No, it's a long time ago. Yes, well that happens. So you played the organ and you went to school to grade 11, and then what did you do? Did you want to go to higher education?
I did a whole year in what they called at the time finishing school.
Oh really?
And I went to the convent.
And where was finishing school? In Brigus or in St. John's?
Brigus, in the convent, St. Joseph's Convent.
And you had to stay in the convent?
No.
You went during the
went
daytime?
home. Went, yeah.
And what did finishing school teach you?
Well, you did commercial course.
Okay.
You
Which
did
is secretary and
typing.
all that. Typing.
And they also taught you how to walk.
Okay.
How to sit up straight, how to behave yourself.
So that you could get a job in a business.
That's right.
Basically.
They taught us how to walk.
Taught you how to walk.
Do you know that? We were actually taught how to walk with books on our head. And they had this big mirror. It was so cute, you know. I was telling one of Donald's friends years ago. He was in doing, looking for people for a play this years ago. And they had the sister, Mary Teresa. She had this big mirror. Now, she said, each one of us would have to go in and walk right to the mirror. And then she'd look at you and say, now, did you look at yourself? Do you know how you were walking? Would you hire you?
And then you would be able to tell.
And then we'd had to go back again because, you know, you were slumping and you weren't walking properly. You didn't have your arms. Mary, you know all that, don't you?
So then you finished finishing school,
Yeah.
and then what did you do? Did you go to work?
Yeah.
Where did you go to
Pepperell
work?
Air Force Base.
Oh, you came into St. John's right away.
I came into St. John's when I was 19.
So like that summer you came in and you went right to Pepperell.
Yeah. I had an interview.
Yeah.
No, first I didn't go right to Pepperell, actually. I had an arrangement with CIBC, wasn't it?
Oh, and you were working at a bank.
Imperial Bank of Commerce. No, I had the arrangement. The sisters arranged where you had to go.
Yeah.
Each one of us were given a certain time that we had to go to St. John's, get in a cab, get in a taxi, go to St. John's, and they had our time arranged previously.
For an interview.
Mary knows that they did everything right.
They used to do everything for you.
Everything for you.
Everything.
And so my first interview was with the bank. And there was one woman, I don't even know who they were now, and there was 5 or 6 men sat around this table, and I was sat there in a chair like this, and they threw questions at me like you wouldn't believe. And one of the biggest questions they always threw at you, you know, out of a clear blue sky, they give you, say, multiply 17 by 17, or, you know, 126 by 20, and then, you know, somebody else would say something else, and then they'd ask you another question. But by and large, what they were talking to you about was math.
Yeah.
Math, you know, over and over. And I passed, which they were very pleased at the convent because I passed.
So did you go work for the Imperial Bank? You passed the interview, but you didn't take the job.
Then I went to Pepperell.
That was the second interview.
And I got interviewed down there and decided I wanted to go there. You know why?
Why?
My first job was in what they call packing and crating.
Yeah.
And I worked for Major, Captain Bob Lewis. What was his last name?
Engelbrecht.
Engelbrecht. Yeah, I'm the one who typed his papers when he was leaving the base. I typed his papers. And I worked for him. He was a real gentleman. And and I went to work for him, and because there were a lot of people who wanted to go to work, and they would go into this area of packing and crating, and they wouldn't stay. You know why?
Why?
Because it was like a mill.
Okay.
They were building things, packing and crating. I grew up with my father. He was a millwright.
Yeah.
I would love the mill.
So you were happy.
Oh, I was in heaven. I came in from Brigus and I went to work in the same environment in which I had
Which you knew.
just left.
Yeah.
You know?
And did you have a lot of girlfriends and stuff?
Yes.
And did you stay at a boarding house or did you stay in an apartment?
I stayed in a friend of my parents.
Friends of your parents.
First, yeah.
Okay, so you just kind of bored.
And my two friends that I stayed with, one was from Flat Rock, and of course one from Carbonear.
Very good.
Yeah.
And so how long were you working at Pepperell before you met Fraser?
1950. I was with for 5 years.
Oh.
At least 5.
And you weren't engaged to somebody else in the in-between?
No.
You weren't interested?
And marrying an American?
Oh, you didn't want that?
No, my mother said, "You're not leaving the province."
Okay. She wasn't having it.
Actually, she said the country, because we were still
We
a
were a
country as
country
far
then.
as my mother was concerned. No, you're not leaving. You're the only girl.
Yeah. Did you have lots of dates though anyway and go to the dances and all that?
I used to always feel I was the third wheel.
Oh, okay. So you were with the girlfriends. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then you met Fraser and you guys,
I
did you
worked for
stay?
him.
Oh, you worked for Fraser.
He came in when yours area phased out or something. We were up then. We moved from down on the base, from packing and crating. We moved into this huge building in the White Hills, and that was called a White Elephant because it was so big.
Yeah.
You know, what are the connotations of a white elephant?
It's the biggest building in Newfoundland.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was, yeah.
At that time.
White elephant.
And that was similar to, it was supply, base supply.
Right, base supply.
And this is where we worked up. I worked there.
And were you still doing secretarial type stuff?
Yeah, yeah. And essentially, should I tell?
Sure.
Essentially, what happened is I was the senior person.
Yeah.
And I was trained to do the job, you know, and the man who was in charge, he left. And so I said, everybody said, Henrietta, you're going to get the job. You're going to get the job.
But
Your cousin said, you're not going to get the job. I know all these cousins long before I knew Fraser. And I used to babysit their children. But anyway, he said, you're going to get the job. He said, you're a woman.
Yeah.
And I didn't get the job.
No.
And guess who came in?
And you must have not been happy.
Not really.
No.
What a smack it would have given you.
Not really. I don't think I was happy.
Oh.
Although he was very good to work for.
But still, you expected to get the job.
And how many women did you have? How many girls did you have working for you?
20, at least.
20.
How many?
At least 20.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah,
And
there's
they
no
were
doubt
all
about
out to
that.
get him and you got him.
And you know, he was very good, I must say, and I worked for him then. His desk was there, and mine was here. And about 1 hour before we'd leave, this was the bane
Yeah.
in our relationship. But 1 hour before we were supposed to leave to go home, we said, oh, by the way, Miss Roberts, I just remembered something I have to have done.
Oh. And keep you late.
No, I just did it quickly as I could.
Get out of there. And then, so eventually you got over the fact that he took your job.
Oh my goodness, yes, that was gone. I didn't think about that. You know,
Yeah, that was it.
that didn't bother me. It was just an acceptance.
Yeah, I know. In those days, for sure. And you guys started going out, and did you stay working after you got married?
Yes, we
And
did.
what did you work at?
I was moved away from Fraser, and I was with Mr. Marshall and a Mr. Herb Knight.
Okay.
And from Mr. Herb Knight, I learned one good lesson in life. Should I tell it? That always remember, Miss Roberts, down through life, you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yeah.
And I have never forgotten what he said to me. Never.
She's giving out honey every
But anyway,
Or
this,
did he think you were a bit vinegary at the time? No. He was just charming. He was a charmer, was he?
oh, he was a good man to
He
work
was
for.
good,
He
that's
was
good.
good.
And
Yeah.
then after Pepperell closed down, did you go work anywhere else, or did you just stay
No,
home?
I couldn't.
Because you were taking care of his
no,
mom.
I was pregnant at the time.
Right. And taking care of...
No, his mom was okay then.
Oh, okay.
No.
You were pregnant with Roberta.
Yes. Should I tell you that experience?
Sure.
You know, yes, but we were allowed to work then, you know, and when the base phased out in 1960, we both, should I tell that experience? We both lined up you had to go in and line up then, and for unemployment. He didn't have a job. I was pregnant, you know, and we were living with his mom. But anyway,
He high.
what's that? He high. So anyway, I went into, I tell you the truth, I was lined up so long, I got weak. How long was I? I was about 3 months, I suppose. 3 months pregnant, and that sort of, you know,
Yeah. When you're tired.
yeah, when you're tired and you're half, you know. And I went out on the steps, and I sat down out there, and a man was kind enough to get me a drink. He was lined up also when he was outside, you know, and Fraser was in the line over there. I don't know where he was. So anyway, eventually I got up and I went back into the line. And I don't know how long it took me, but it took me a long time to get up to the wicket. When I got up to the wicket, this gal was there, you see. And I submitted. I had my paper all done, and you know, it was signed. Didn't they sign that at the base? What you could do, and what you know, you sort of had a resume.
Yeah.
And I gave it to her like that. She took the resume. Where do you think you're going? I said, what do you mean? You're pregnant, she said. You're not going to get a job with anybody. Go home. And that was a woman. I will never forget it. You know that's the truth, isn't it? I'll never forget it. She said, you're pregnant, she said.
Shocking.
They don't hire pregnant women. Go home.
I know.
Different world, isn't it?
Thank God.
And that was 1960.
1960.
60, yeah.
So you went home and you took care of your 3 childrens
Yes.
and stayed. And did you ever work after when they grew up or anything? Good for you.
There was enough there.
I'll tell you now. When we moved, Roberta was 15. She was 15. Nancy was 9. No, Donald was 9. Nancy was 13. And Roberta would have been 16. And we moved. And grandmother was going to come with us. And we were all going to move, like Fraser had said. The city was catching up with us. And, you know, it was not a pleasant place to live anymore.
No.
And the farms were gone, and the roosters were gone. There was no roosters crowing in the
No.
morning and waking you up, and
It was turned
so
into
you
a
know
city.
everything was gone. So we decided we looked all over the place where we found a house, eventually, on Elizabeth Avenue, and we were just moved 9 days when Fraser's mother took her stroke.
Oh no.
Yeah.
And did you bring her into Elizabeth Avenue?
Yes, yeah. After she spent a month or more we brought her down to the old general,
Yeah.
and then we had to take her to the Grace,
And then brought her to
and the
your
work to rule was on,
house. Oh yeah.
Oh,
and I had to get in. Fraser went on the road because he was out on
Working.
the road with working. And the 3 children weren't all that young, weren't all that old, but they weren't all that young. But I got in Fraser's mother's first cousin, Winnie Davis. She came in and she looked after the children. And every day for 1 month. I went over to not St. Clair's, over to the Grace and looked after his mom because there was only 2 nurses for 14 people. And I tell you something, there was 4 in one room, and I was feeding this one and feeding that one. My wonderful introduction, I'm going to tell you, to
Nursing.
being in a hospital.
So that's so the kids grew up. Nanny moved in with you guys, and what happened to the house on Baggy Hall place? You sold it then, did you?
Yeah, that was sold.
That was sold. And then you stayed in Elizabeth Avenue until
40 years.
40 years. It's a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
And you have how many grandchildren?
4.
They're cute.
I know Victoria, Eamon, Marin, and little Josephine.
Yeah. And they're a treasure for the future.
Treasure. Biggest treasure, I suppose, you can ever have.
Pretty much.
Apart from my husband.
Of course.
I mean, nobody knows how lucky I am that the 2 of us got together. Do you know, Fraser? Do you feel yourself lucky?
Are you lucky, Fraser?
Don't you feel yourself lucky we got together?
Bless.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, where did he say our first date ended up?
Signal Hill.
Yeah, do you know why?
No.
I didn't know. My husband had this pendant for when he went home after he ate. He used to lie down and have a snooze.
Yeah.
We had arrangements. We were going to the special movie up at the Capitol or the Paramount, one of them on that road. What happened is he went to sleep and he never came to pick me up till 9:30 or 10 o'clock.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, well, I wonder where we can go. He said, have you ever seen the city from Signal Hill? I said, no, I never did. I had no reason to go to Signal Hill.
What a charmer.
I had no reason. What reason did I have to go to Signal Hill? So we went up on Signal Hill.
That sounds
And
like-
by and large, the biggest thing we talked about was work and other things, which I won't discuss.
No. You gotta have some secrets. Anyway, I'm out of tape. So say goodnight. Say goodnight. That was great. 25 minutes.